Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. So it's Friday night in Mississauga, and I'm on Eglinton, just south of the airport, at an incredibly interesting, good restaurant called ChainSmokers, serving halal barbecue food. We've had an incredible meal. We've had brisket, we've had ribs, we've had chicken wings, we've had jerk chicken, which I'm still the steam is coming out of my ears with the jerk chicken. We've had French fries, we've had coleslaw, we've had rice. It's been unbelievable. And I'm here with the proprietor, Michael Lublin, who's got really quite a fascinating story about himself personally, about his restaurant, about his background in restaurants, and I think some interesting views on different cultures and how we've got to think about humanity and get along a lot better. Michael Lublin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Brian. It's so great to be here this evening, and it's even better because I'm in my restaurant with the great Brian Crombie. I'm so glad you're here, and thank you to our very, very dear friend, Mark Borkowski from Mercantile Acquisitions, Mergers and Acquisitions. He put us together tonight. I've waited a long time for this, so I'm glad we're here now.
Well, it's interesting because we've actually met numerous times together, and we're going to get into this later because I want to talk about the restaurant first of all, but we've met, you're Jewish.
Yes.
I'm Christian, and we've met probably half a dozen times at Muslim events in Mississauga. And I think that's really quite fascinating that the people that have brought us together over time have been the Muslim community in Mississauga that's been very welcoming to both of us and asked at a couple of different events, both of us to speak. And so that's really interesting. But let's talk about that in a couple of minutes. Let's come back to ChainSmokers. So this is a smokehouse barbecue restaurant. You're serving halal meat. Tell me a little bit how you got into this business.
Well, first of all, as you know, and as a lot of my friends know and colleagues in the industry, I've been in the food service and hospitality industry for 35 years now.
35 years.
35 years. I started out as a dishwasher in a kosher steakhouse in Miami Beach. As you can see, I've come full circle from kosher to halal.
As a dishwasher, I understand.
A dishwasher, absolutely.
Then you got promoted to a busboy.
That was my biggest promotion in my life. So from a busboy, I became a waiter, and then the rest is history. I did go up to New York City, worked there for a little bit, came back to Canada, got into the restaurant industry. I worked my way right to the top to become a vice president, chief operating officer of two publicly traded companies. One had 3,800 restaurants in 80 countries. 3,800 in 80 countries.
And that was what?
That was Jugendfrühs.
Yogurt.
And Jugendfrühs frozen yogurt. And we made a bunch of acquisitions, bought some famous American iconic brands. Then the other company was MTY Group out of Montreal. MTY controls the food court industry in Canada.
Oh, really?
If you go to the food courts in any shopping mall, there's maybe 12 to 15 different food brands there. I would say that MTY owns 2/3 to 3/4 of every single one of them.
Really? Didn't know that.
Yeah. Today we have, or MTY has, I think it's about 8,000 restaurants in 150 countries around the globe.
And then how long have you owned ChainSmokers?
So I've had ChainSmokers now. We put it, my partner, myself, Chris, put it into a test pilot program close to our house on Bathurst Street for about 2 years. We opened the first store 6 months before COVID, which is the store we're sitting in now.
Yeah.
And then, as you know, or as you remember, and everybody else will remember, the Premier shut the province down on March 17, 2020.
Great timing for your opening.
It was it was only great timing for the opening, but March 17th also happens to be my birthday, St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, really?
So luck all the Irish, as they say. The Premier then opened the province on July 1st, 2020, and we began to build the business then at that time. We put the entire menu on offer at 50% off so we could drive the sales and drive customers into the store.
People must have been lined up outside.
They were lined up outside.
You got great picnic benches out here.
That's correct. So we had a tuchus, as they say, a tushy in every seat in the restaurant. We had a tushy in every seat on the patio, and people were literally waiting on the staircase, waiting for seats to get in. We drove our volume up 400%, and we drove our same store sales up 115% from that time forward on that sale. We kept that sale on for a whole year, building the business after when COVID.
Awesome. And you serve what?
Okay, so what do we serve? So somebody once said to me, so can you, sum up ChainSmoker in one word or one sentence? So I have a few words. Best brisket.
Best brisket.
Best brisket. That's what the ChainSmoker is. We have a wonderful, wonderful Eastern European recipe. It's not Texas style brisket, which I always find rugged. It's more South Carolina. little bit more with a tangy vinaigrette, sweeter sauce, and where the brisket literally falls off the fork when you go
I
to pick
gotta
it up.
tell you, it almost melted in my mouth. It was spectacular. Where's your, what's the address here?
So the address here is 5555 Eglinton Avenue West, Etobicoke. A lot of people think it's Mississauga, but believe it or not, Brian, the border between Mississauga and Toronto, Etobicoke, is right beside us, the street
It's
next
like,
to us. It's
half a
called
block.
half a block. It's called Rakely Boulevard
do
and
you have a-
Pimlico Creek.
Do you have a website?
Yeah, we have a website. Yeah,
What is it?
ChainSmoker.ca.
We're gonna take a break, and I gotta tell you, this brisket tonight that I had was absolutely spectacular. You've got to check it out. ChainSmoker Restaurant, 5555 Eglinton, Etobicoke, just south of the airport, just at the Mississauga, Etobicoke border. Fantastic meal. We're gonna take a break. We're gonna be back in 2 minutes with Michael Lublin. We're gonna talk a little bit about his incredible entrepreneurial career, a bunch of the different experiences he's had, and maybe talk a little bit about humanity, because it's something that's very deep and important to him. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting with Michael Lublin. He is the proprietor of ChainSmoker's Restaurant. It is a barbecue restaurant, 5555 Eglinton in Etobicoke, just at the Etobicoke-Mississauga border. And I wanted to chat with Michael, not only because it's a great place to come for dinner, but because he's got a really interesting entrepreneurial background. And I thought we'd spend a little bit of time talking about this. He told us earlier that you started out in the restaurant business when you were a teenager, washing dishes and bussing tables at a restaurant, a kosher restaurant in Miami Beach. But then you became a restaurateur your whole life and became very involved in the restaurant business. How did you choose that business? Was it just by chance because you started out as a busboy?
I think the best addiction in the entire world, I mean, people have addictions. It's really serious what those addictions are. Mine is food. Mine has always been food. You name it, sugar, sweet, sour, everything. I love it. I got to tell you, remember, I'm a child of the 60s. Not that that has anything to do with it, and we won't mention Bill Clinton. but I love food. I've always loved food. And one thing I knew is, like, one of my bosses, who was the legendary Stanley Ma, the CEO of MTY Group. Here's a man who came to Canada with $50 in his pocket, and his empire is worth, close to $10 billion.
Seriously, $10 billion?
$10 billion empire, publicly traded. Stanley had always said to me, remember, the restaurant industry, Michael, is about one thing and one thing only: great food. Great food, great food. Give them something to come back for. And that's so all the concepts that I've ever built, ever developed, have always been around the food, not the environment strategy or the design.
Kosher steak food, frozen yogurt, food court, smokehouse. What other concepts?
So we created an award-winning Italian concept a couple of years ago, Chris and I, with Stanley Ma at MTY, called Tosto Quickfire Pizza Pasta. We opened the first store on Bay Street, and then opened within 12 months, we opened 4 more restaurants throughout the GTA. And we served millions of meals in the first year alone. We had an incredible reputation there. It was a fabulous brand. I'm just trying to think some
Cultures, which was
so Cultures Restaurant. Cultures was the first vegetarian vegan concept in Canada in the 70s. So we Cool Brands International, the owners of Yogan Frus, when I was vice president there, we made the acquisition. We bought Cultures. We diluted some of the underperforming restaurants, created new shareholder value, and then I subsequently sold it 2 years later to Stanley Ma at MTY Group. And then at the time, Stanley made an acquisition unbeknownst to me, and he bought 450 Mrs. Vanelli restaurants. So I went to MTY and I found myself running 600 restaurants for a couple of years.
How do you run 600 restaurants?
It's a really good question. I have to tell you, it all starts at the very top. I'm not going to say with me as the vice president, but with Stanley as the CEO. He was a great CEO. He was a mentor to me. He was a father to me. And it was kind of what I tell people, a George Steinbrenner, Billy Martin relationship. He fired me 3 times and he hired me back 4 times.
Well, that's a great record. I'm not sure if I've ever told you this, and you may not know this, but I got my start in the restaurant industry. I was a food and restaurant consultant with Laventhal and Horwath, who were the preeminent consulting firms in the food and beverage business. And I was assistant to the president of Keg Restaurants. And my claim to fame is that number one, we bought 2 restaurant chains when I was there. We bought Crock and Block and Corkscrew, and we tripled in size. But George Tidball, who was similar probably to your mentor at MTY, had this attitude that you had to know what the restaurant business is about. Now, graduated top of my class in business and was doing acquisitions and financing for him. And he said, but Brian, you got to go and learn how to run a restaurant. You got to be in the restaurant business. And so Thursdays and Friday nights in Vancouver, I would waiter at the Keg Boathouse and the Keg downtown. I made more money in tips waiting than I did with my day job, the highfalutin finance job. And I loved it. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot about people. I learned a lot about food. I learned a lot about management.
If I could tell you, that's phenomenal. I didn't know that about you. That is absolutely incredible. One thing is you brought back names from the past, Laventhal and Horwath. There was a senior partner there by the last name of Mamet. I don't know if you would remember, but in an old life of mine, Sid Mamet, in an old life of mine, I actually went out with his daughter.
Life has
Where
its
does that-
connections in life.
Where does it take us?
So let's talk a little bit about right now. You've got this chain. How many restaurants?
So we have 3 restaurants operating here in Etobicoke, Milton, and London, Ontario.
Okay.
We're building a 4th flagship store on what Toronto Life magazine called Ground Zero in the halal food market in North America. And that's on Lawrence Avenue between Warden and Victoria Park in Scarborough. That'll be our flagship store there. That opens this month, I think in about 3 weeks from now. And then we're opening our 5th store in Ajax. Our 6th store will be in Sarnia, Ontario. We have a wonderful, wonderful franchisee in Sarnia. And by the way, we have incredible, incredible franchisees in this brand. Every single franchisee is the most genuine individual you have ever met in your life.
What to be a good franchisee, what do you need? You need a certain network. Do you need a certain attitude toward business? Tell me what your criteria is for a franchisee.
So with some of the other firms, the criteria for a franchisee, and sadly enough, is a heartbeat and a pocketbook. And that's what's really sad about the industry. And that's maybe why I've always argued and I've debated that our industry is on borders mediocrity.
Yep.
And there's very few exceptional brands that really rise to the occasion and can compete with great brands in London, England, Mumbai, Dubai, New York, Chicago, LA. I like to think that our food at ChainSmoker is one of them. And when you ask about that question about franchisees, I'll tell you, I look for individuals that are extremely genuine and dedicated to hard work. Whether they're blue collar, white collar, whether they have money or they don't have money. If they don't have money and I like the franchisee, then I'll arrange the financing. We'll finance them.
Really?
And I've done this already. And the reason why I do it is we had a philosophy when I was a kid growing up in a private rabbinical school in Miami, Florida. And that was that no child should ever be denied a quality education due to lack of funds. And because I love entrepreneurship so much, and I'm a late bloomer, I'm an entrepreneur that got into this game very, very late at 55 years old. I believe that an aspiring entrepreneur should never be denied the opportunity of going into business for himself due to lack of funds. So if the person is a sincere, genuine, dedicated, diligent individual, hardworking, and that's demonstrated on resumes and also in the interview process, then if they have the money, great. If they don't, then it's up to us to go and find that money for them and get them into business.
So if people are interested in franchises, what do? They call you up? Do they sign up on your website? What do they do?
Yeah, well, we have ads running in Business Exchange magazine, online in Business Exchange, which is one of the best mediums that are out there right now. Better than that is, of course, word of mouth inside of restaurants. When people find out that it's a franchise, they immediately ask for my name and my number, and the staff or the franchisees are constantly giving it. Yep. So we field about maybe 10 or 20 inquiries a month, and we narrow down those inquiries to maybe 1 or 2. Our growth has been very, very slow in the franchise industry over the 2.5, 3 years of COVID, but it's been cautious growth,
Yep.
very cautious growth. One thing I could attest to is that the ChainSmoker will not have a casualty. I have not had any casualties in my franchise life. In fact, the other great employer and senior that I had was the legendary Aaron Soroya from Yogan Frus. And there's Yogan Frus was a case study at York University in the business school there. It was young entrepreneurs, Aaron and Michael Soroya, at 18 and 19 years old, that started Yogan Frus and turned it into a $2 billion public company. Aaron had always, he used to always accuse me of being the franchisee's dream. There you go, Luby. There you go, Luby. He used to say, there you are, fighting for your franchisees, fighting for your franchisees. I used to say, of course, absolutely, Aaron. That's who pays us.
Yeah.
These are the people that pay us, and you're wealthy because of their hard work.
So some people would say that owning a franchisee or buying a franchise is just a way of buying yourself a job. Is that true or not true?
I would say that, like anything in life, it's the 80-20 rule. 80% of that, 80% would be those that buy themselves a job, and 20% are those that really get over and have a very, very positive cash flow business with reaping wonderful, wonderful profits and a net income.
And so what's the benefit of a franchise versus doing it on your own? You've got, the established brand, the established menu, the food. Tell me, what are the benefits of it?
I advise everybody I speak to at the franchise show, which is another medium where we meet potential new franchisees. I advise everybody, you came to the franchise show, you made the best decision that you could before you go into business. If you go into business on your own, if you open up as an independent, you will get screwed by everybody. Why? Because it's a world, the world of business is often a world of greed, and it's every dollar counts for everybody. Well, it doesn't count for some people, it doesn't count for me. But let me deal with that for a moment. When I say you'll get screwed, these are not restaurateurs to begin with, and they're not entrepreneurs to begin with. These are people that worked hard their whole lives and they have a dream. They want to go into business for themselves. They have some money to spend. When people see them coming, I even tell them, I give them a list of who's going to screw them. The real estate broker will screw them. The landlord will screw them. Their own lawyer will screw them better than anybody because he sees them as being vulnerable. He'll take them to the cleaners. A task that should cost $1,000 to $1,500, he'll charge them $5,000, $6,000. Or I just heard a story last week, $8,000. I couldn't believe that story that I heard. $8,000. These poor independent business people that consulted with asked me to consult for them. I said to them, what did the lawyer do? I said, it should have been like $700. Anyway, the general contractors, no, that's a rough business on its own. General contractors, trades, sub-trades, everybody's out to take that buck. So I think that when people go to a franchisor, a good quality franchisor, and they sign a contract, they sign an agreement, and the franchise is going to be turnkey for $350,000, the franchisor commits to that and he turnkeys it for $350,000.
So you take care of the broker, the landlord, the lawyer, the contractor,
the engineers, the interior designers, the suppliers, setting up the business for success, the purchasing, setting up the books, everything. It's a turnkey operation, and it pretty much is flawless. When I say, let me say this, it's been proven over and over again. You have a $300,000 budget. You want to go into the restaurant business yourself. By the time you you stick the key in and open the door, the front door to your restaurant, by the time you do it, you're in for over $1 million. And you have no way to recover that.
Pay it back.
Yeah.
And so number one is that you've got all the programs so you can get into business at a far cheaper price. Number two, when I was at the Keg, it was interesting. We did a bunch of surveys of successful restaurants versus unsuccessful restaurants. And the most successful ones are where we had joint venture partners, so franchisees effectively, where the partners were in the restaurant Thursday and Friday and Saturday nights. They had to be there. They had to be the maitre d', they had to be the manager on duty, they had to be the front-facing person in the restaurant. They had to set the atmosphere. Is that true in your business as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the ideal situation. That's what's ideal. This restaurant that we're sitting into tonight happens to be a corporate store. It does very, very well, and it makes good money. I always, when I jump into sometimes I jump in to work with the staff here. I just want to see how things are going, and the best way to do it is to work with the staff. I'm constantly telling the staff, if I worked in this restaurant, the sales would be double, don't you? And of course, they all shake their heads. They go, yeah, we know, Mike, we know. And it would be double. That's the difference. That's the difference between an owner-operated establishment and versus let's call it a corporately run business. When
Why is it?
there's a vested interest in it. So every detail of the restaurant is at the forefront of the owner-operator's mind, and they don't forget it. They have eyes in the back of their head.
So you're Jewish. Why
Yes.
would you open a halal restaurant?
That's the, what do they call it? The $64,000 question. I'm very well known in the GTA in many different ethnic communities. I opened a halal restaurant because it's something that's dear to me, something that's dear to my heart. What I didn't tell you earlier when we were having supper was, if you look at my desk in my office, you see a Torah, the Jewish scrolls there, the Jewish Bible. You see a Christian Bible, and of course you see several different versions of Quran. And I do have a couple of imams that I'm very close with. I study Quran. I didn't mention that before, but I do study Quran. It's the Ahmadiyya Muslim movement have a wonderful, wonderful expression. It's kind of like the tagline, and I think all human beings should adopt it. It says, love for all, hatred for none. Love for all, hatred for none.
That's beautiful.
And the truth of the matter is, if you remember the first wave of COVID, if you go back and you watch the media or go onto social media, at the forefront of charity, benevolence, and one person taking care of another was the Muslim community. Charity had always been the foundation of the Jewish community. It still is today. And it's a foundation of many communities. But I think the community that's been excelling with benevolence and philanthropy and charity, and as you know, and I know because we've gone to so many fundraisers in the Muslim community. In fact, you and I, Brian, have been going to so many fundraisers in the Muslim community. We need the community to make a fundraiser for us. Because we're going broke. But the truth of the matter is, they are out there and they're at the forefront and they're fighting the good fight. And unfortunately, as we know, there's great anti-Semitism in society today. There's great Islamophobia. It was here long before, unfortunately, this very tragic war in Gaza. But these ills in society were here already, and very little has been done. It's systemic, it's endemic, and we have to fight a good fight to eradicate all the hatreds, all the racism, all the prejudice, all these terrible, terrible ills that really affect individuals, families, communities, and in fact, our whole country.
I couldn't agree more. And we're going to come back and talk about that a little bit more after the break, if we could, because I know you're very passionate about that and about humanity. But I just got to ask you, what is halal?
Thank you very much. I'm glad you asked. So halal is a ritual slaughter of an animal that is done in such a humane, compassionate way that the animal has no suffering whatsoever. And that's very, very important. Listen, it's not only important to Muslims and Jews. Judaism has kosher, Islam has halal, but it's important to the Christian world, to all religions also. In fact, yeah, as we both know, there in India, many different dialects of religions in India also won't even eat meat altogether, for that very, very matter. Cows are sacred there, yeah, etc. So with it being the most humane, it's and blessings, of course, are performed as well, that the animal is being slaughtered for the sake of my performance, my elevating the physical and the material in the world to a greater sense of spirituality.
Beautiful. That's great.
Thank you.
We're going to take a break for some messages and come back with Michael Lublin, the proprietor of ChainSmoker Restaurant. In just a couple of minutes, we're going to talk a little bit more about his faith, about his charity, his work in different communities, and maybe touch a little bit on what's going on in the world today and what he thinks about that. Fascinating conversation and a great place to eat. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be back in 2 minutes. That's great. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I've just enjoyed an incredible barbecue. We had this huge platter with ribs and brisket and chicken wings and jerk chicken. That, my God, the steam is still coming out of my ears, and it was spicy. Let me tell you, some unbelievable coleslaw and French fries and rice that was really good rice. I enjoyed that. So it was a great platter. It's a fantastic restaurant, halal meat. Right on Eglinton, right at the Mississauga, Etobicoke border, 5555 Eglinton Avenue, East, Eglinton Avenue East, Eglinton Avenue West. I don't even, Eglinton Avenue West, Etobicoke. Michael Lublin, as I mentioned, is the proprietor. And I've run into Michael, interesting enough, numerous times before. Michael's Jewish, I'm Christian, and we've met at a bunch of different Muslim events in Mississauga. Why have you been so involved in Muslim charitable organizations?
I suppose the answer to that really is something that I was brought up with from, first of all, my parents, the Torah, that says that, you know, that teaches you to love all of humanity. In fact, if you recall, I started almost every single speech I ever gave, including to 2,000 people in one of the mosques in Mississauga, and also a speech I gave at the IMO when our brother Mohammed was unfortunately murdered there by I think it was a white supremacist or neo-Nazi just a couple of years ago. And there was a memorial service with the police and the mayor and all the politicians were there. I start out every single one of those speeches with the same words. Hine matovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. That's Hebrew, and in English it says, how wonderful. Behold how wonderful, how joyous it is to sit with your brothers in unity and in togetherness. And I started every speech in every mosque with those words. And of course, I went on to talk about whatever the subject matter was that I was asked to talk about at the time. It's truly about brotherly love. Each person is responsible for his fellow man in this world today. It's collective responsibility, collective accountability. And we are our brother's keeper. Another line that I'm constantly uttering, I am my brother's keeper. And I think that it's one thing to think about it. It's one thing to be taught about it in Sunday school and in Hebrew school. It's another thing to speak about it and act on it. And it's the action that really counts. So from, you know, the love that my parents gave me and instilled in my brothers, the love that we're also supposed to have for our community and our fellow man, is something that took me a long time to finally accomplish and to kind of get it right in my more mature life. And I went out into the world and I wanted to, first I needed to experience the Muslim culture, Islam a little bit, as well as I did Christianity at one time. I happened to love gospel music. I didn't tell you about that. And I did join a Black Pentecostal church here in Toronto. And then when I got my mother and members of the Jewish community to go to church on Sunday, everybody thought I was crazy, including the pastor. But you know what? But it was
Great music.
Great music, but the service and the sermon, the togetherness, as they say in the Christian world, the fellowship was, you can't buy these things in life.
Well, and one of the things that you said at dinner, which I really resonate with, was you said breaking bread together is one of the keys to community.
That's correct. Our Prime Minister recently said, in reference to the anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, the anti-Islam, anti-Palestinian sentiment, anti-Arab sentiment that's going on recently in our society, which is so tragic. He said in an interview, he said, oh, come on. He said, like, if we don't get it right in Canada, where are we going to get it right? If we can't sit down with one another in Canada and have a normal conversation,
Where can you?
with all the rights to disagree, where can you do this? What hope is there for the world? So, and that's always, I've always held that sacred. That's what Canada's all about. That's what multiculturalism is all about.
Tell me,
But that's what makes us a very special nation on the face of the earth, to which we, Palestinians, Arabs, Israelis, Jews, any ethnic group, any religious group, LGBTQ community, whoever, whatever it is, We are to be a guiding light unto all the nations of the world. People have to look at Canada from all around the world, and indeed they do. And that's why they'll do anything to get to these shores, to have a life of liberty, of freedom, of happiness, of sanctity, of security, of safety, and to be and develop to whatever you want to be and become in life. This is Canada, and we are that guiding light.
I agree, but let me ask you a personal question if I could.
Yeah.
You're Jewish, you have a halal restaurant, you've got a lot of Muslim friends. How did you feel about what happened first on October the 7th with the Hamas attack into Israel, and then with the Israeli, attacks back into Gaza to try to eradicate Hamas? How do you think that through?
Well, first of all, it's not easy. It's very difficult. I think if somebody has an answer for that, I'm not sure they're actually telling you the truth, or I don't. And that's the whole thing. It's a little hard to decipher truth in this whole thing. I've always claimed not to be a geopolitical person. I'm not. I don't live over there. I don't understand life over there. I live here. I understand life here. And I understand the Bible, the Christian Bible, the Torah, the Quran. So it's very hard to answer such a question. What I do know is that the Quran teaches, and our prophet, peace be upon him, has always said that humanitarianism is first. Religion comes second. Humanity comes first. Indeed, the Torah says the same thing. In the Jewish Torah, you're allowed to break the laws of Sabbath if it's to save the life of yourself or another person. So we're saying that life itself, the sanctity of life is paramount to anything else. But what happens? Of course, I could answer and tell you that on October 7th, it was the biggest tragedy that the Jewish people have seen since the Holocaust. I have always said, I tell people that I'm not the child of a survivor of the Holocaust. I am a survivor of the Holocaust. And people don't get that. What do you mean? Well, I think if Hitler's plan and the whole Nazi plan was to eradicate the Jewish seed from the entire world, then every Jew who lives and breathes and walks the planet today, in fact, is a survivor of the Holocaust. So I feel that. I was raised with that. I was also raised in a house where a young Palestinian boy came to Kitchener as a teenager, and Rotary called up the rabbi and said, "Can you come to my office? Come to our office." And the rabbi went, and they presented a Palestinian boy to him and said, "Rabbi, can you take him in, or can you find him a home?" And the rabbi said, "Well, he's Palestinian. Why are you coming to us? What about the Arab community or the Christian community? Why to the Jewish community?" I don't know what the answer was, but I do know that the rabbi called my father into his office. My father went down. My father said, "Well, let me see the boy." So they called the boy in. Rotary brought the boy to the rabbi's office. My father took a look at him, fell in love with the big brown eyes, and he brought him home, and he was raised in our house.
Really?
And he became, if not one of the top 10 wealthiest Palestinians, wealthiest Canadians in the country. And, I was about maybe a dozen years ago, I had a court case in Kitchener. I'm sitting in a restaurant before my court case, and I hear that voice. I hear Shaki's voice. And I'm saying, my God. I get up and I go around the corner, and there he's sitting. And I go, "Shaki." And he looks up, he goes, "Oh man." And he stands up and he comes over, he hugs me, he kisses me, and he says, "I haven't seen you since since your father died, my father died." And he introduced me to everybody who was there, all his lawyers. He was in the court the same day, and said how this is my brother. I was raised in their home. His father was a father to me. I mean, that's who we are as people. So if you ask me, or if you ask any Jew, and this is the tragedy because of what we see in the streets, if you ask any Jew, everybody's torn and distraught over the innocents in Gaza. Nobody wants to see what we're seeing. And when I say I don't have the answers, I'm not going to say, I can't. I don't know. I just can't say. All I could say is what I told 4 Muslim friends, businessmen, very successful businessmen that came to see me here. And they said, what can we do? And my answer was, I'll tell you what we could do. We could get together and pray. Let's pray. Let's just pray that the good Lord, Allah, the merciful Allah, will have benevolence upon his children. And I also reminded them, let me tell you something. I said, when Allah sees his children fight, like any parent who sees his children fight, it hurts Allah as much as it hurts those that are fighting, and maybe more.
You quoted former Prime Minister Golda Meir of Israel at dinner after the first Yom Kippur War. Tell me what she said to the United Nations.
Yeah, she had given a speech after I believe it was after the 1973 war, and she said, this is a person who lived through the Holocaust also. She had said at that time, I think Israel was victorious against, I think, 4 or 5 Arab armies at the time. And she had said that we will forgive the Arabs and the Arab nations for killing our children in this war, but we won't forgive them for making us have to kill their children. And it's something that I remember. I would have been 13 at the time. I remember when the war broke out, I was sitting in the synagogue with my father, and somebody came in and they saw the paper, and they told my father, they told other members of the congregation. It's very much a Jewish trait. At one time in life, I like to say I was a hater. Why is anybody a hater? They're a hater. Hatred comes from ignorance. Hatred is born out of ignorance. You read and see something long enough on TV and in the newspapers, you believe it. If somebody tells you something long enough over and over and over again, you're going to succumb to what they're telling you. You're going to believe it. Until you go out and you start to decipher the facts and you listen to the narrative on the other side. A lot of Palestinians don't know that there's an enormous movement in Judaism, in the Jewish world, a majority of Jews that do see a two-state solution as the only answer, where both groups of people, one family, can live together in peace. And I'm not sure that message has really gotten out. And I mean, sometimes I made a joke in some of my speeches, and I thanked the host for inviting me to this mosque to give this speech. I said that it's so wonderful to be sitting with family. And I said, you know who we really are? We're this family, this one family. We're the greatest running sitcom of the most dysfunctional family on earth. And we need therapy. And then, some of the imams, they're very educated. They come over to me later and they say, boy, you hit the nail on the head with that one. They said, yeah, maybe we need to go into like collective therapy or family therapy together and sort out all these crazy differences that are hurting innocent people in the world.
I'm not sure about therapy. I think that's probably a pretty good idea, but I do think that some of the comments you've made about praying together, about getting together, about breaking bread together, about getting to know the other in our community, so that we know what a synagogue is like. We know what a mosque is like. We know what a Christian church is like. We know what a gospel singing sermon is all about. And I think that too often, they say some of the most segregated times in our society are Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays when we're at mosque, synagogue, or churches. And we're not sharing together. And so I do think you and I have been at an iftar dinner together, where Muslims celebrate the breaking of the fast. And I think that if there's anything more that we could do as we enter into this holiday season, where Jews will be celebrating Hanukkah, Christians will be celebrating Christmas, etc., is to get to know one another. The two of us have also been at a Muslim Christmas party where we were invited to come and share Christmas stories, so that some of our Muslim community members would have an experience of what some of our celebrations and traditions are all about. So in other words, get to know the other in our community. I think that's one thing that we can do to take away some of the dysfunctionality in our family. We're going to take a break for some messages and be back for some concluding comments with Michael Lublin at the ChainSmoker restaurant in Mississauga, actually in Etobicoke, in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie restaurant. We're not at the Brian Crombie restaurant. We're at the ChainSmokers restaurant on the Brian Crombie radio hour with Michael Lublin, the proprietor of ChainSmokers restaurant on Eglinton Avenue in Etobicoke. Michael, you've been an incredible success. You've had unbelievable experiences. You're now a Bank of Montreal BMO entrepreneur in residence. Do you have a couple of suggestions for everyone on sort of the secrets of success in business?
Yeah, I obviously I do. And you know, I'll tell you, first of all, and they're not any different than what we've heard already. It's just that I think the difference with me is I've experienced it. And if I've experienced it, then I could at least pass something on to others. You know, entrepreneurship is really, really difficult. It's really hard. It's not for the faint of heart. You know, there's so many sleepless nights. There's no question that no matter what your investment is going to be or what you perceive it to be, the actual budget will probably be well over what the potential budget was. You'll probably fall short of the potential pro forma projections. The question is, you know, I always say this, I tell this to my staff here, and I tell this to my franchisees, and I used to tell it to my licensees and franchisees around the world and my other brands. And that is, think about one really simple thing, okay? It's very easy. We go through life and we point fingers. We're constantly pointing fingers and putting blame where it doesn't lie. Blame lies with one person and one person only. As my mother used to always say, you're an adult. You know, don't blame anybody else. You're an adult. You have to make the right decisions in life. I always say that if a business is not successful, if a business fails, you can point the finger at one person, and the answer is it was set up for failure. If a business succeeds, you can point the finger at one person and say the business was set up for success. So when I'm constantly telling staff when they're doing their you know, more micro tasks, franchisees with their micro tasks as well as their macro overall running their business, that when they meet up with daily challenges, which sometimes often can become problems, you know, look at how things were, how it all came about. Try to find how this problem developed. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to see it was in the decision-making process. That decision-making process is very, very important. So when I tell everybody, ask yourself, did I set the business up for success? Did I set the kitchen up for success? Did I set my staff up for success? Did I set this individual isn't, you know, like, as they say, the sharpest knife in the basket? Did I set that person up for success? Or did I clearly set them up for failure? Yeah. Did I leave them on their own? Were the wrong people training them, etc.? And I think the answer comes all the time. So I think one of the most important things is setting up the business for success. I also believe that a person should only go into something that, number one, they know something about, and number two, that it's even better and greater towards the success if they have experience in it. The third thing is very, very important, is to make sure you have adequate cash flow, adequate capital, and a contingency of capital. So while I have adequate capital right now, I wouldn't mind, I'm constantly looking for investors or private equity, you know, so that way I can enrich in the coffers so I could fulfill the dream that I have, and that's help my franchisees, those get into business, those that are worthy of going into business for themselves, but don't just have the capital wherewithal.
Well, if I could, you know, maybe give you 3 comments that I've perceived from my dinner with you tonight, and listen to your story both at dinner, watching you in this restaurant, as well as our conversation, is that you've talked about mentors a lot, and the gentleman that ran the the fast food in food courts, the person at Yogan Fruz, your father, and other people. And so therefore, I think having mentors in life is critically important. The second thing is you've talked about your staff, the franchisees, as well as your staff here on numerous occasions. And so I think picking the right staff, training them and treating them like parts of your team is critically important. And then I guess the last thing I'd like to say is you bragged about your food, a way that, only an owner, a mother, a chef will drag about the food, which has got to mean the quality is fantastic. And if you don't have good quality in whatever your product is, that you're not proud of it, you're not going to be successful. And so I think that's a key to success. So Michael Lublin of ChainSmoker's Restaurant on Eglinton, thank you so much for dinner tonight. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts about business, about the franchise business, about what's going on in the Middle East. And also, I think this whole idea about breaking bread with other people in our community. I really appreciate that thought, and I've appreciated the role that you've played in Mississauga, and I look forward to breaking bread with you again, and maybe some ribs and brisket too.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to have you as a guest tonight and to be on your show. And it means the world to me. Thank you.
That's our show for tonight, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I remind you on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca. My podcast and video casts are available on my website, briancrombie.com. And don't forget, ChainSmoker's Restaurant, 5555 Eglinton Avenue West in Etobicoke, just at the Mississauga-Etobicoke border. You got to have the brisket. Awesome.